Prifysgol at Nairn, Devon. Welcome to the meeting, the extraordinary meeting of Nairn Devon Health Board. We are meeting on an issue, and that relates to the eMERTS paper, which I do hope you all have the opportunity to review. As you know, the position and the final decision on eMERTS and the changes that are suggested to be effected will be taken by the joint committee on behalf of health boards in Wales, but they have asked that the health boards provide them with our advice and agreement, whichever way we go, to further action before they meet on the 23rd of April. So the health boards have been meeting over the last 2 days to consider the proposals following three sets of consultation, which are placed before us today. I should like to, before we start, welcome, where's he gone? Neil Patrick. Oh, he's off there. Neil Patrick, who is our new independent member, who we hope will be able to join us very soon in person. And welcome, Neil. We had a good discussion yesterday, and we look forward to working with you. So I'm glad you could be in attendance today, and thank you. I'd also like to welcome Ross Whitehead, who is the Deputy Chief Ambulance Services Commissioner, who's attending instead of Stephen Harry, and will take us through the paper and answer, I'm sure, any questions that we have. You have received the papers, which are comprehensive, but the issues that we need to consider is the proposal put in front of us. We obviously have a statutory duty to consider the benefits or otherwise of the proposals to our population, but we must, however, ensure that whatever our decision is, nobody else is disadvantaged by that decision. The decision, as I said, is delegated to the JCC, which is a new committee formed of WISC and the NCCU. The 7 Health Board Chief Executives represent the bodies on the committee, and they will form part of the decision-making process. Any decision that we take today will inform those decisions, and we await the result on the 23rd of April. So, Nicola, would you like to start?
I think we were going to ask Ross to present the paper.
Yeah.
But yeah, just to reinforce, there's been obviously a huge amount of work on this agenda, I think, and there's been considerable discussion recently to try to make sure each health board considers the kind of recommendations from its own population perspective, and then how we take that to the JCC then to consider the overall position. But so really welcome the discussion today from our board in terms of how this impacts on the Nairn Devon population in particular.
Thank you. I shall ask Ross to take us through the papers, and then I'd like Gemma, if that is possible, to provide representations from SICE. Is that okay, Gemma? Thank you. Ross?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the board for the opportunity to take you through this today.
You're on mute. Oh, something's gone wrong.
The screen's on mute. Hang on a second, Ross.
Hang on.
Okay.
That was sound.
You're having the same. We all
just on the right.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Sure, that's it. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the board for the opportunity to take you through this paper today. So I intend just to give a brief recap of the paper and the recommendations, and then I'll be more than happy to take any questions that anyone has. So just a bit of background. So it was in around autumn 2022, following receipt of a proposal from the Emergency Medical Retrieval and Transfer Service, or eMERTS for short, that East asked the Chief Ambulance Commissioner at the time to undertake a wider review of the service. And just as a reminder, eMERTS is the service that provides specialised pre-hospital critical care in Wales. and it does that in partnership with the Wales Air Ambulance charity. I think it's a really important point to remember that the charity provides around 2/3 of all funding for this service. And the purpose of the review really was to explore 4 broad areas to see how improvements could be made. So the first area we looked at was in relation to unmet need. So we define unmet need as patients who are identified as would benefit from receiving the service, but the service wasn't available at the time of their need to respond to them. And there's around 2 to 3 patients per day across Wales that fall into that category. And that's mainly concentrated at night, where we have less resources available across Wales to respond to them. From an AB perspective, of all of the unmet need in Wales, around 15% of that unmet need sits within your health board boundaries. The second area we looked at was utilisation or busyness of the various bases and the assets. And there's quite a significant variation across those bases. So the southern bases predominantly occupied for around 40–50% of their time, with the Mid Wales base and the North Wales base in the 20%-ish mark. It varies year on year, but much significantly lower. Thirdly, we looked at geographical coverage and the equity of that geographical coverage provision, particularly with a focus on night, where again, I said there's one asset that covers the whole of Wales, and that asset's based in Cardiff, which does leave quite a significant gap in the northern parts of Wales in terms of timely coverage by air. And finally, we looked at making the best use of the rapid response vehicles. So within each base, within EMIT, they're both aircraft and the rapid response vehicles. And again, there's significant variation in how those rapid response vehicles are used, predominantly being driven by the proximity of those bases to population density. Alongside the review, we undertook an extensive period of engagement, I think over 30 weeks in total, and we held a range of mixing of drop-in sessions, formal public meetings, as well as providing a range of feedback mechanisms and processes, either through online or through telephone access, for people to be able to provide feedback in at various points throughout the review. And during that time, we held regular discussions and correspondence with Llais. And there's plenty of detail and lots of detail available on the engagement process available on our website. In relation to our final phase of engagement, so phase 3 engagement, we received 5 online responses from residents of Aneurin and Bevan. This was just under 1% of all of the responses received. And we presented the final report to ISC in March, and that was building on all of the work and the other reports we produced since the end of 2022. And we aim to set out a structured evaluation of how the service was delivered, the operational efficiency of the service, an overview of the stakeholder engagement and the feedback we received and how we responded to that, and how the service coverage across Wales could be improved by the recommendations. And so the report sets out 4 recommendations. Recommendations 1 to 3 are focused on the consolidation of the Carnarvon and Welshpool bases into a central location in North Wales, near the A55. With recommendation 4 focusing on the development of a bespoke row-based model for enhanced or critical care in rural and remote areas. And that the purpose of that recommendation is very much to address the concerns that we heard during the engagement process around the provision of services for patients experiencing conditions that would generally fall outside the scope of the EMIT service in those areas. And whilst there's more work to be done on the clinical and operational model for how that would work, the recommendation does include the development of a task and finish group to complete that work by the end of September 2024. And I think I'd just reflect that from an AB perspective in particular, whilst the changes proposed by the report are in locations that sit outside of your health board boundaries, and that those bases provide quite a limited response to Aneurin and Bevan, with the overwhelming majority of responses for Aneurin and Bevan residents coming from either the Cardiff or the Davern base. the modelling does suggest that you would see a slight improvement in the reduction in your level of unmet need and a slight overall improvement in your average response times. And a lot of that will particularly be driven by the extra availability of resources at night in North Wales, allowing the South Wales assets to remain in the southern part and be available to respond to your population. So I'll pause there, Chair, and I'd be happy to take any questions or areas of clarification.
Thank you, Ross. Would you wish to add anything at this point?
No, I think it's really helpful in terms of, you know, kind of clarifying that impact on unmet need and response times, recognising, as you say, the changes. You know, we've been very cognizant of the changes happening in other parts of Wales, but understanding that impact on overall unmet need and what it means for Nine Bevan is really helpful clarification.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Are there any questions or comments? No? Alan?
It's just, I know Karen's here as well, in case there's any questions in detail, but in terms of the engagement, recognising some of the benefits that Ross has just outlined there, you'll see we didn't have huge amounts of concrete responses, notwithstanding the detailed sort of push that Karen's team did in terms of making sure that we could push out make sure our population were aware of the proposed changes and had a number of different opportunities to respond. And I think the team were really cognizant of trying to remain ready to step up engagement depending on sort of the temperature in terms of feedback, but that wasn't necessary despite some evidence in terms of the reach that we got to. So I think that's important to know in terms of for our population and their response. In general will come in and come up with their perspective, but I think I feel assured we've ended up taking a robust approach to that engagement.
Thank you. Nicola?
Yeah, I think just before we bring Gemma in, so I think that the issues, so from an Nine Bevan population, there's no doubt this is a benefit in terms of meeting the unmet needs, because often, and I've also checked in with some of our own clinicians who work on the EMID service, and they are very supportive of what's being proposed, because anything that addresses unmet need is a good thing across Wales, and all populations hopefully set to see an improvement in that. I think when you then just in terms of taking that wider perspective, understanding the impact particularly on Powys and Betty Cadwaladr populations, and I know there's been a lot of discussion around recommendation 4 as noted in the paper, and therefore making sure the timing and alignment of recommendation 4, putting the extra road service along with the changing basis is something I'm sure will need to be kind of aligned really. The other bit was just getting that, from a Llais point of view, is being content that we had done robust and sufficient engagement. And I know there's been some recent correspondence, and I know Gemma will share their view, but I think given there's more work to do on this, in terms of the direction of travel and the proposal, it feels like it's the right thing to do. Yeah. But it is quite important for us that we recognise we've had low engagement, as Hannah said. Yeah. It's useful to get Llais perspective. And I think it is also worth, as Ross briefly mentioned, the Wales Air Ambulance have been working with us, and they're a big contributor and a big partner in this as well. And I know they are keen to see the improvement in addressing the unmet need across Wales.
Thank you. Gemma.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Ross so far for the overview. Llais is also of the view that service development to address unmet need is also important and must be the primary goal. In terms of the engagement, the feedback from the population was clear. Whilst Nine Bevan had low response rates, I'm here on a national perspective as a national position on the concerns to go forward. From a Llais perspective, we think that the population's view, particularly in the Welsh Pool and North Wales areas, their concerns are high, they're significant, and we're not yet reassured that they've had enough detail about what that means for their communities in those areas for a decision to be made today or even within the next few weeks. We, as an organisation, are not clear on what the urgent pressing issue is that would require a decision now ahead of the task and finish group completing its work. We feel that if the further development of a road service or critical care wraparound service and the task and finish group's work could be achieved ahead of the decision, this would give the public more reassurance about what that means for them and the public acceptance level then for when a decision could potentially be made. So we're of the view that is there scope on the public's perspective to offer the public further reassurance that does a decision need to be made now or at the point where the task and finish group have undertaken its feasibility work, its scoping work, so that the population can understand the detail of any enhanced services that could come out of this.
Thank you, Gemma. Any questions to Gemma? Paul?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very important question. I wondered what the rationale was for not doing it in a different order in that case.
Ross, can you advise us?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things. So we received that correspondence from Llais yesterday in relation to the urgency of the decision, and clearly that'll form part of the decision-making approach at the JCC later this month. I think what I would say is that whilst the ESCIN in its previous format, and I assume the JCC has made a determination that the recommendations should be considered as a package and in the round, they are somewhat trying to achieve slightly different aims. Recommendation 1 to 3 is very much about the organisation and the efficiency of the delivery of pre-hospital critical care. So highly specialised, less than 1% of all ambulance 999 demand across Wales. Whereas recommendation 4 is somewhat more broader, and I think the recommendation states enhance and/or critical care, and I think the enhanced element of that is really, really important. I had the opportunity to go to many of the public meetings and many of the walk-in sessions, and I've obviously been able to see all of the engagement we received. And much of the concern that we received in those remote and rural parts were for conditions that sat outside of the threshold of current EMIRT services, and particularly things like stroke, STEMI, heart attacks and other elements. And very much that what recommendation 4 aims to achieve is to provide that level of clinical involvement in those areas. And these are much bigger numbers. We're in the region of 12-15% of total 999 demand then, so much broader than the current EMIRT's position. So I think they are very complementary, and they both provide enhancements to the services that patients in Wales would get. But I think the JCC will need to take a view on the dependencies of those. I guess just in terms of the urgency element, this has been a relatively protracted period. We started this process in the summer-autumn of 2022. The charity have been clear on the need for clarity for them in terms of a decision-making process, and clearly we'd want to provide clarity and confirmation to staff within the service as well about what the future of the service looks like for them.
Thank you, Ross. Could I just ask, please, in terms of the service in the more rural areas to which you are referring, that would benefit from an EMIRT rather than the usual emergency care services, is there any diminution in the service availability to that for that purpose?
So overall, what the modelling would suggest that in areas of Powys and in North Wales, you would receive a overall reduction in unmet need and predominantly an overall reduction in response times. Much of the reduction in response times is driven by much shorter response times at night, leaving you to an average overall reduction. But Stephen has been very clear throughout the period of the review that if you receive a service now, you will continue to receive a service in the future. And I think it is probably quite important to remember that the service doesn't operate on a linear fashion, i.e. certain bases respond to certain parts of Wales. The aircraft are dispatched by a critical care practitioner in the ambulance control room who is screening those incidents and making a determination on the best resource to send to those individuals. So we don't anticipate any changes in those. And as I said, overall, the model suggests a much improved service and a reduction in the level of unmet need. Not a resolution in unmet need across Wales, and I think Nikolai stated at the final ESC that we don't intend that this will be the final development of this service. There will be further work to be done in future years as we look to bring that level of unmet need down as low as possible.
So just to be quite clear, you are saying that the standard of service response for the areas that are expressing concern about the apparent diminution in their services will remain or improve?
Yeah, so absolutely. The modelling suggests a reduction in unmet need for both Powys and Betsi Caer Wald.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that was most helpful. Any questions to Sarah?
Yeah, thank you. Ross, I understand this is a public engagement, but I'm just wondering whether there's any early indication from staff currently working in the north of the country that changing the base may impact the availability of current staff that could then put more pressure on the 24/7 service, or is there likely to be support from the current staff to move to a new base?
Yeah, so I think it's fair to say, so of the two bases involved, I think it's fair to say that there's a mixed picture amongst the staff. Some staff very supportive, other staff are less so and have some concerns. We have worked closely with the EMIT operational team and sought assurances around the ability to staff those. And we've received that assurance. And I think I just draw on to recommendation 4 in particular. You know, I think that is a real opportunity for rural remote areas in particular to develop quite exciting jobs that people would be attracted to. And, you know, the ambition is that this will be a partnership arrangement with the Welsh Ambulance Service and provide beneficial recruitment opportunities for them as well as part of
that. Yes, Penny.
Maybe a bit early because I don't think Ross has finished yet, but the underutilisation of the clinical resources. I was wondering where that comes in and how important it is in relation to the meeting patients' unmet needs. Yeah. Because, you know, that is an important issue to address, isn't it, from financial point of view, if nothing else.
Ross?
Yeah, absolutely. So utilisation, very fine balance, particularly for these types of resources. So we obviously don't want them to be too busy because they won't be available then for these very small number of highly specialised incidents that occur. But equally, we want to make sure that we're getting value for NHS money and that we're utilising those staff that we have supported for their training and education. So very fine balance. And what the modelling suggests is that by combining the base, you will improve or increase the overall utilisation rates within that combined base, but while still maintaining sufficient availability for coverage. It also proposes some alternate shift times, so particularly an overlap of resources in the afternoon period where there is quite a large number of unmet need. But yeah, overall, we would see an improvement in utilisation, but our ambition isn't to have these crews busy 100% of the time because clearly we need their availability to be able to respond to your populations.
Thank you, Ross. Are there any further questions or comments at all? Okay. Can I ask you then to consider the recommendations as described? And make our decision and our recommendation to the joint committee on the basis that this solution represents an improvement in meeting unmet need, that there will be no diminution in the service provision in rural areas, hopefully an enhancement, but most importantly, the essential work on looking at the bespoke proposal in respect of cover for road-based, enhanced and critical care services will proceed at pace and that we will receive the outcome of that in the very near future and no further than September 2024. On that basis, are we happy to accept recommendation 1, 2 and 3? Are we all agreed?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And we would urge and will support the JCC to undertake the additional essential work on recommendation 4 and for you to report back to us in September, please. Is that all right, Ross?
Yep.
Okay. Anything further? No? Can I thank you very much, Ross, and thank you ever so much, Gemma. I know you've done a lot of work on this, and it's really been helpful to have your views. I know it isn't totally in accord with the decision that you reached, but I hope you feel that we have sought and gained sufficient assurance that A, this will benefit our population, but also will not disbenefit anybody else's. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Any other business? The date of the next meeting is Wednesday, the 22nd of May. And thank you very much all for attending. We will now go into a board briefing session. Thank you.